Monday morning, or Monday all day, probably 7 and 8 hour sessions, 7 to 8 hours. In the Ninth Circuit out in California, Judge Claudia Wilkins, the hearing for revenue share NIL is Monday. So what's going to happen on Monday? Probably not much, because it's a hearing. So a lot of people think, well, we're going to really know the direction we're headed in. You may know a little bit, but there's not going to be a judgment. It's just a hearing. So she's going to basically probably listen to the dissenters. And you say, well, who are the dissenters? Probably the young men and young women who feel like the market value is not going to be the right number for them. And they will oppose it. Could be some Title IX issues brought up. The plaintiffs, you've heard the name Kessler, the NCAA, the Power 4, Power 5, we're kind of content with where we are right now, moving forward. So we'll be okay with revenue share where it is, NIL, but will it all come to a head on Monday? That's not going to be the case. It's just she'll listen, and then she will decide probably in 7 to 21 days where we land. So let's talk about revenue sharing for a second. So you hear the number 20.5 million. That's the number. Okay, it's not uniform across the country. I can talk a little bit about the SEC. Maybe somewhat accurate. Josh might be able to share a little bit with the ACC, but we got 20.5 million. We have agreed to subtract 2.5 million from the 20.5. 2.5 million comes off the 20.5. You may say, what's that for? That's for scholarships. That's for additional scholarships for other sports. Football is not affected. They still get their same 85 scholarships. But for the other sports, you can add 2.5 million. Now, it's your school, the scholarship may be 75,000, maybe 50,000. But you can you can subtract up to $2.5 million that we've agreed to in our league. So our pool of money that we're starting with is 18. Does that make sense? So we're giving volleyball a couple extra scholarships. Baseball is probably going to get probably a minimum of another dozen, probably more than that. Most people are going to be somewhere between 28 and 34. Roster size is going to be 34. So baseball is, I never dreamed baseball would ever move off 11.7, but it's going to take off. Women's soccer is going to get a couple more scholarships, women's golf, whatever the case may be. Each school can do their own thing. But we've agreed to subtract at least $2.5 million. Now, there are a couple other schools that have spent a lot more money than that on additional scholarships. Because some sports, I think, some schools, maybe Texas has, I don't know, 28 sports. The University of South Carolina, we have 21. So you can spend more, but you can only subtract 2.5. So we're all starting in the SEC with 18. So where does that money go? Where does that 18 million go? First question would be, well, where does it come from? It's not coming from our coffers. My first 10 years as the athletics director, we balanced the budget. We were in the black for 10 straight years. And I gave $4 million back. I say I, but it's a we. We gave $4 million back to the university for merit-based or need-based scholarships because we were profitable. We paid our bills. Now, sometimes I'd have to tell a coach, you're not taking a charter flight, you're going to take a bus on this trip. Or, you're going to manage the program a little bit differently, or we're going to have to reduce what you're spending. But we made it. And that's almost a thing of the past. I think there were 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 20 schools that operated in the black. I think it's under 10 now, maybe 5 or 6. The pressures are too great. So where does that money come from? It can come from a lot of different sources. You can have people donate that kind of money, university subsidies. There is no particular place that it comes from, but it's got to come from somewhere. So now we're down to 18. Where does it go? Well, football is going to get the majority of that, right? You've probably heard 75, 15, 5, and 5, right? That's pretty much a category. I'm not going to say every school is going to do the same thing, but that's about the case of where the revenue share will go. Football is the biggest generator. Football at most places pays at least 80% of the bills based on their revenue generation. So football is going to get 14 million, maybe 15 million, 13.5 at some places. So that's going to be their share. How does it get divided on that team? That's up to you as the head coach, basically. You may have a general manager, assistant general manager, you may have development, player personnel, whatever the case may be. But somebody's got to make that decision. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, whatever the case may be. So that's your money in revenue share. Well, in basketball, men's basketball is probably going to get the 15%. Women's basketball going to get some too. And then the decision will have to be made. Where does it go? Do you give it to baseball? Do you give some to baseball, some to softball? That'll be an individual case. That'll be where all that lands at the end of the day. So it's a challenging situation just with the revenue share. But with revenue share, the field is a little bit more level, right? If football is going to get somewhere between 13, 15 million, it's going to be a little bit more level for everybody. Are there exceptions? Of course. You probably have read a little bit about like the Big East in basketball, right? So let's say that the SEC, the ACC, Big Ten, they might get, I don't know, men's basketball might get 2.75 to 4 million to 5 million, somewhere in there. The Big East is going to do a lot more than that. Football is not a priority in the Big East. And there are probably a number of schools that don't have football in the Big East, right? So they're going to want to make sure that basketball is taken care of, $6-7 million. That's going to be an issue somewhere down the road that will be battled out, I'm sure. So revenue share shakes out a little bit. Any questions on revenue share?
Coach, I got one. Dean Boyd at York. So I've been to a couple of clinics already, and both places I went, they had hired general managers.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably the trend, maybe?
I guess it is the trend, it seems to be, and Josh can probably talk about that a little bit too. A lot of schools have done that. We haven't at our university. Now, we got people in those roles. They just don't have those titles. They're within. Maybe we've hired a couple extra people to help manage that. But ultimately, you would think at most places, the head coach is, and that position coach or that coordinator is intimately involved in the decisions that are made. But that position, yeah, is general manager. You know, in the NFL, you really put dollar values on each position, almost, right?
Well, that's what I just came from the North Carolina clinic.
Right.
And they actually put that up there. Michael Lombardi put that up there, that they actually have specifics that they're looking for per position.
Well,
money value.
Belichick was pretty successful in the NFL. But if I want a running back more than he wants a running back, and he's got a number on that running back, and my number's bigger, I might beat Bill Belichick on that player. So I don't know that it's going to fit like that necessarily. It probably would be ideal if it did, but I don't know that it's going to fit necessarily. Some teams have bigger needs than others, and you're going to maybe spend money that way. But that's a good point. And I know they try to do that a little bit for different positions, but it's not perfect.
Brian Rick from Camden. That 20, the revenue sharing 20 million.
Right.
Did you say where that came from? Is that TV money?
Well, it's coming from somewhere. I mean, it's
just allocating it to y'all.
Well, it's a new budget item. I mean, a lot of you probably are athletic directors as well as coaches, right? So you have a budget. Well, we just got handed the $20.5 million bill. Put this in your budget analysis.
Yeah, don't ask questions, I get it.
Yeah.
It's here, don't ask questions.
Yeah, and
Is that earmarked only for student athletes?
yes,
Like, the only thing you spend on student athletes or any other kind of stuff?
revenue share, yes, it's student athletes.
No coaches?
No.
No buildings?
No, it's student athlete distribution. So again, in the SEC, we have agreed to take 2.5 of that and create scholarships, add scholarships to the other sports. Call them Olympic sports, if you will. But we've agreed to add. Like our men's basketball program, we had 13 scholarships. We'll have 15. That's the new roster limit. Roster limits are another issue, but there's going to be less and less walk-ons going forward. That's going to be the case. But that 20.5 million just got added to the budget. And you're going, well, hold on, I don't have enough to cover that. Okay, go get it. And you already know what your TV revenue is. We know what we're getting from the SEC. We know what our distribution is, but we didn't plan on that covering that 20.5. So it could be a donor-based. It could be what you do creatively, how many concerts you have at your football stadium. You have a concert every weekend when football's gone. Coach is not going to like that turf torn up too much, but there's going to be things that have to happen where you generate more money. Or universities have to subsidize. As I said earlier, most of the schools in the country get subsidized from their university. Athletics get subsidized from their university. We haven't been in that group. I doubt Clemson's been in that group, but even in the heyday, there was less than 25 that operated without university help. And now that number is less than 10. The last time I checked, it was 6. And, there's a couple of schools in the Lone Star State that have a lot of gas and oil. They can make up for a lot of difference down there. So it is what it is, but that's one piece of it. So revenue share is an interesting dynamic. It does somewhat level the playing field, though. It does. Football is going to have about the same amount of money in our conference. It could be a difference of 500, even $1 million, but it's not going to be drastic like it has been. Like the last couple of years, it's been drastic at some schools. Big Ten, ACC, SEC, it's been drastic. So that's, in my estimation, that's sort of the clean side of what we're looking at going forward. I don't mean the other side's dirty, but it's easily handled. You know what you're dealing with. These are the numbers. That's year one now. Keep that in mind. It's year one. Year two, that 20.5 goes up 4%. So it'll go up 4% for the first 2 years based on what we've done, what we've agreed to so far, unless it changes. It could change. So that's, if my math is right, that's 21.3. Well, then you can still do the 2.5, but you can maybe add that on top. So you can have more money to spend the following year. So it just keeps going like anything else. Josh, anything you want to add before I do the next segment?
I think you did a good job of really highlighting it from a high level. I have some slides here. I'll pull up kind of my screen. And so just looking at the house case, like you mentioned, is my screen visible right now?
It's good. Yeah.
You got it? Okay. So looking at it from that 30,000 foot view and then paring it down, right? What matters most moving forward? Those roster limit changes, the introduction of rev share, and then the restructuring of NIL rules. So obviously this is a transformational shift moving forward in how we approach roster building. We talked about the question about GMs and those roles becoming more common now in college football. And I think you're seeing those with experience in personnel who've been in college who now have that title. And we have software now to kind of help manage, okay, how are we going to pay our roster? What is that going to look like moving forward? You certainly have NFL personnel who are coming in, right? Oklahoma brought in former GM, North Carolina, their model as well. So it's pretty interesting to see the different dynamics, moving forward there. And, talked about some important dates coming up, obviously next Monday. If next Monday goes kind of how things are looking and anticipating, July 1 being that anticipated start date for rev share to begin. And then, kind of looking at the roster limits. Right. So this has been a big topic of discussion and things that we're trying to figure out on our end, how to manage this. So moving forward, rosters are going to be capped at 105, right? So at Clemson, for us, that means a reduction of 30 players off of our roster. Those few and walk-on type players, you do the quick math, 30 multiplied by 135 schools at the FBS level, that's a significant amount of spots that are going away for walk-ons. That's in the thousands of numbers moving forward. So the reality is there's going to be fewer opportunities for high school athletes, and walk-on spots at the next level are going to be more limited, right? So that 105, there's no scholarship reduction now, so you can have up to 105 players on scholarship. You could have 100, you could have 95, and keep traditional walk-ons, but that's going to be kind of a different dynamic there moving forward. So if there's anything you want to add on to the 105 roster limits, feel free to jump in there.
It's interesting, and I'll go back to Josh's first slide. He mentioned the $2.8 billion back pay. I didn't bring that up. That's in this settlement. So the 2.8 is for players student athletes that have come and gone. They're going to collect $2.8 billion as part of this settlement, potentially. So you go, well, where's that money come from? Well, right now, each school is going to be responsible for $1 million annually, which will come out of basketball revenue. The NCAA, we think, is going to pick up the difference in that amount of money too. So that's a back pay settlement lawsuit that is on the table for sure. So it's a lot of money. Some of you guys may qualify. You better make sure. Probably too late to get your paperwork in, but you could have qualified. But there's a lot of good points there. Roster limits. The walk-ons could go away. 85 is where we're at in the SEC right now. I think the ACC is there too, and you can have some walk-ons, but not as many as in the past. And it's been a big debate. I don't think I've heard a college football coach say that that's okay. We need more. We need more. Now the NFL plays with a lot less, but they say they need more, and that's debated. They don't have a taxi squad like the NFL, and it does take away opportunities. It's going to take away opportunities for other sports as well. There's going to be roster limits.
John Reynolds, can I ask a question about the NIL back pay?
Yes.
Now, will that be equal with all players, or will they make a determination of value of each individual player?
I think that's Josh, you help me here. That's a revenue share back pay. So it will be an equal distribution as I understand it.
I believe, and I'm not as well versed on that side of it, but I believe there's a formula and a criteria based on where you played, how long you played. There's a formula that's going to help kind of determine what that pay is going to be for each individual athlete, I believe. But that's a good question. Yeah.
And it won't be significant for each person, but it will be money.
How many years back does it go?
Do you know how many years it goes back, Josh?
They go to 2016.
Yeah. We got some qualifiers in here.
So you talk about this roster limit. Let's assume a team wants to get creative in the amount of roster, all the walk. Let's say went 85 scholarship players, 20 something. Are the walk-ons included in the revenue sharing as well, or do they have to be on scholarship in order to? They're moving forward, not post, but moving forward.
Scholarship.
Would they have scholarship on?
Yeah. Now, you can do 105 scholarships. I guess, are the ACC at 85, Josh, or are y'all at 85 for now?
We're at 85 right now, and then we'll be now as a league. I'm not sure if there's a limit or a minimum roster or scholarship number, but we're at 85 right now, and anticipate going roster limits 105 in the fall, and at Clemson we'll have 105 on scholarship come fall.
Josh, this is Mark Hodge again, will you quickly mention, we talked the other day about how maybe not all 105 will actually be involved with the revenue, and then how you also may have spring or fall camp rosters that get reduced down to 105.
Right. So, our kind of assumption right now, and up to individual schools on how to manage this, right? And I think we're all trying to figure out the best way to pare down to that 105, and I think coaches out there all share a similar sentiment that having a gradual step down from what your roster is now to 105 would have been helpful. But for us right now, like we have more than 105 players on our roster in the spring, and so those players, we anticipate them going through fall camp, and then once that cut happens, they're off the team essentially. So you're going to have more than 105 going through camp. Camp ends, you go to 105, and then that's your set roster for the season.
Yeah, we're on the same page. We're at 120 right now, I think, for spring practice, and there it sounds like you might be at 130. But then come the fall, there'll be a cutoff date prior to that first game where your roster has to be set at 105. It's going to be interesting. And again, these are conference decisions. We can't go sit down with the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12 in a room and say, let's all do this. Can't. It's collusion. You can't do that. You can do it as a conference. You can sit down and go, do we want to do this? What do we want to do? And we did that as a conference. I'm sure the ACC did, but you can't get together and do it because it's collusion. So we've come up with different roster sizes for baseball and basketball and golf and tennis and all those sports that may be different from the Big Ten or the Big 12 or the ACC. So that's the world that we're living in right now. It's two points I'll just make, and we'll move on to NIL. But y'all know what's going on. I mean, the portal is wide open. I mean, we're in the midst of the high school kid. The high school kid, you got to be something special, or you're not getting an opportunity. You're going to have to go a step down mid-major and play your way up and get that opportunity. Coaches, I mean, when I coach, I always love to have a half a dozen freshmen on my team in baseball, but I also love to have a half a dozen junior college guys. 21, 18. 21, 18. I didn't want everybody to be 18, so I would take some older guys. Well, that's what's going on now. Proven players at a mid-major that go in the portal. It's crazy what's going on in basketball as we sit here today. The high school kid, and I think we signed maybe 3 or 4 high school kids in the fall in basketball. That's probably a high number of taking high school kids. So it's really from that standpoint, it's rough. But the portal, that's what the portal does. So NIL, this is where it gets a little more complicated. NIL is today April 3rd. Today's April 3rd. So this hearing is April 7th, next Monday. So technically, the Wild Wild West is still alive and well for like 4 more days. You can make a deal. You can get a deal for one of your athletes to do a commercial for Steak and Shake for $100,000, and it's real. You can do it. But you have to have it in stone before April 7th. You don't necessarily have to pay out till June 30th. But when July 1st hits, now it's got to be market-based, market value-based. So is that commercial worth $100,000 on the market? Probably not. So now that's going to enter into the picture. The SEC is using Deloitte to come in, LBI and Deloitte, to monitor what a value is. So if a car dealership wants to give you $100,000 to take pictures in front of a car and throw it on TV, and they give you $150,000, and Deloitte says, "Oh, hold on, you can't. Anything over $600, you send to them, and they'll tell you whether it's market value based, legit." And if they say no, that's only worth about $40,000. Well, now you give more than $40,000, that becomes an issue, and there's stiff penalties that go along with that. So does that tee you up for your slide a little bit?
That's perfect. Yep. Basically, like you said, any deal over $600 has to be approved by a third-party source. Deloitte, who you mentioned, is kind of who's heading that up for us as well. And so with this, obviously, comes a lot of questions, right? Like, what is fair market value? And I think there's a lot of unknown answers that's going to come from this, and we'll see how it goes. But this is, like you mentioned, pretty tough regulation from the NIL standpoint, where it's been nothing like this. Now all of a sudden we have a very formal approval process, and it's very structured on, okay, you got to turn this in, get it approved before you do the deal. So we'll see how this one goes.
See, that's going to be on Monday more than likely. I'm just speculating a little bit, but on Monday, when Judge Wilkins starts listening, the plaintiffs are going to want to settle more than likely. They're going to, and the NCAA and the schools, those plaintiffs, they're ready to be paid. There's millions and millions of dollars on the line for them. So they're ready to be paid. The dissenters are likely to come from suited athlete group that give an example. If I could put Mr. Brumfield on the spot here, if Founders decided to take the quarterback from Clemson and the quarterback from Carolina, and he's got new branches opening up in the upstate, and he's got new branches opening up in the Midlands, and he says, you know what, I'm gonna, this is big for us, and I'll give $150,000 to both of those guys to go do that, to go do an opening, if you will. And Deloitte says, no, that's you can give them $50,000 or you can give them $10,000. Well, as a student athlete or their agent or their representative, you're going to say, hold on a minute, he's willing to pay that? And you're going to tell me that I'm not worth it? I mean, there's going to be an argument there, right? And I didn't even get started on Title IX. That's going to come into play as well. But that's probably where you're going to hear some noise on Monday.
Who's going to, I'm showing my ignorance about the third-party people like Deloitte, but who's going to monitor them? Because in Texas, that third-party company might say, we're going to take care of Texas more so than the East Coast, the Deloitte.
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at?
Well, I hear you there. Yeah. Josh, can you answer that question? Who's going to monitor the monitors?
That is a good question. And, I make the assumption that everybody is using Deloitte, that this is through the NCAA. Everybody has to go through this approval process. It doesn't matter where you're at or what conference you're in. Now, that was my understanding, but that's a good follow-up question that I certainly think we can answer.
There's another entity associated, not with Deloitte, but another entity called LBI. I don't know exactly what their initials stand for, but LBI, they will monitor what happened. So they may be the guard for Deloitte, that we agree with what you did. We approve of your decision. But I'm sure that's another court case that you're going to challenge. You're going to challenge my value? That could be the case. Now, we'll see where that goes. But I got to think that that's going to be on the table. And there's another scenario that she listens to on Monday, the hearing goes on. It'll probably go on all day. And then 2 weeks from now, she says, not going to rule. And then you got another year till it comes up again, and the Wild Wild West continues. I never dreamed we would be in this place. And let me say, and I'm sure Josh agrees with me, I'm not against revenue sharing. I'm not against what we're doing. The numbers at times seem a little astronomical, but I'm not against that. We live in the greatest country in the world, and we pay a lot of coaches, not just football, but we pay a lot of coaches a lot of money. So they're getting theirs. So, yeah, I know student athletes, a lot of them get full rides, they get cost of attendance, which is $700 or $800 a month. You probably used to get $15 a month for laundry money, and they're getting a lot more now, and the benefits are greater than ever. But it is what it is, and there's a lot of television revenue, there's a lot of money being made, and I'm all for it. It's just sometimes you go, the numbers are a little bit, you got a lot of players making more than the guys that are coaching them. And that's never been the case before. And now that is the case.
Hey, Rick, Sean Burns. How does this impact current deals that are already going? Are they grandfathered or supposed to have to cease and desist?
I think they're gonna have to cease and desist. Is that your understanding, Josh, that when the new legislation, whatever it may be?
That's my understanding as well.
Coach, I was listening to Rick Newhouser recently discussing both these issues, or in fact all three, and he was discussing the fact that the agent, you just mentioned the agent, because of these complexities, the agent has a new, much more powerful role, and that a lot of people are saying that they will replace the college recruiter, that the high school coach, which is our concern, how we react to these changes, that the high school coach will now have more to do, we're talking about top tier player, with an agent that where he formerly would have been dealing with the recruiter, the college recruiter.
Great point.
I mean, did you see that? Is that what's going to happen?
Even more. Because we've always heard about agents, but now in the last year, now I'm hearing the word agent, consultant, handler. I'm like, well, isn't that one person? Oh, no.
Well, where are high school players going to learn about how to deal with an agent? Because a few of us have had NFL players who shared their agent experiences with us. But other than that, high school football coaches, we have not had direct relations with agents.
Yeah, I know, and I think that's a legitimate concern, that you have the resource to people you trust. And hopefully it'll be the universities you deal with that will be able to provide a good enough advice for you. But, they have a vested interest in your student athlete, whether it's a women's basketball player or football player. So hopefully you'll be able, you might not have it in-house, but we'll have people in-house that are experts in the field that hopefully we'll know everything we need to know moving forward. But
So when we have a player recruited, starting right now, our best resource would be whoever is recruiting him, how are y'all dealing with him?
I would go, this is my opinion, Josh could say something different. I would go to the university first, and the people that they're going to play for, and get their advice, because there's a lot of money out there for agents right now. This is a whole new deal for them, and a lot of them are cashing in a big way. But like I said, now there's consultants that are involved that are stronger with a family maybe than the agent is. They like the agent because of the expertise, but you've got to have the consultant on board as well.
Will that revenue sharing that you decide to do be like public knowledge year to year? So in specifics we'd see.
Yeah, I think the question, Josh, was about if the revenue share will be public knowledge. I think it pretty much is public knowledge. Like right now it's 20.5, it'll go up 4%.
I mean like per player, like kind of how the USA Today every year releases publication of every coach.
I don't expect that to be transparent. Do you, Josh, per player? I don't think that'll be transparent.
That's one of the challenges for us, right? Is at the NFL level, they have that information, and for us, you can guess and you can kind of have an idea of positionally just how you structure it, but no, we're not going to be able to have access to how much our peers are paying each player as it stands right now.
Just to make sure, so is it true that despite what the colleges might pay the athlete in revenue sharing, whatever that is, they're still at liberty to go out and do anything else outside of that for themselves, even though it may fall under these regulations? They're unlimited?
My opinion, and Josh needs to weigh in here, that's gonna, I think that's gonna have to fall in the NIL space, that I think we're going to have knowledge of it. Maybe you disagree, Josh. Is that?
So is the question in reference to, say, a kid doing a deal in high school, and how does that affect it moving
No,
forward?
just college. I mean, if the school's paying them revenue sharing, but they get contacted by a dealership or they get contacted by a clothing firm, does that still fall under you guys, or is that on their own to go out and do what they want as long as it's in market value?
Yes, they can do those deals. That's considered true NIL, which I think is a good thing about this. Is we're getting to the back to what NIL was intended to be, which is endorsements, appearances, autograph signings, that kind of stuff. And schools now have the ability to help facilitate that, which hasn't been the case across the board. So marketing agencies, partnerships can be done through the school now to provide athletes the resources to connect to those companies and capitalize on their NIL.
So we have people to do the contracts, to check, the checks and balance. But I think to your question, it will have to be disclosed. It can't be secret deals, because that goes back.
It has to be disclosed. Yeah, that is a big point.
All right, Josh, real quick, some of the basic recruiting things. Third-party recruiting agencies, say Catapult, National Press, people like that, because our kids get inundated and us as well as trying to pay for services. Who do you guys actually use there?
Yeah, so we subscribe to Catapult, National Preps. We use UC Report. We use a company called ZeekRoot. And we have our own database called ARMS, which basically compiles all this information and all the data we get on every kid from every scouting service resource all kind of goes into this one database that we use internally.
Will you explain the process that you guys use of evaluating, one, using the actual matrix of size, position, and so forth, and then also how y'all actually handle the film that's seen by the coaches, and how you also do it weekly?
Yeah, so I have some slides here. So just kind of looking at the film eval process and pulling the curtain behind that a little bit. So just looking at us internally last year. So our staff evaluated a little over 3,200 prospects in the 2025 class. So what does that mean? That means each kid had a Clemson staff member watch their film and give them a grade. So a question we get a lot, and talk to Coach Hodge about this, is where do we start? So I would say highlights matter, right? So the first thing, when you're looking at 3,200 kids, you got to start somewhere. So we start highlights first, and we want to see the player at his best first. And then as they make their way through our evaluation process, and I'd say this is probably pretty standard at most places at our level. So we pay to have access to where we can get every game, every clip, and we can make our own cut-ups on each kid as they make it through our process. So we watch full games. We make position-specific point of attack cut-ups, and then in season, as we kind of pulled down that list and funneled down from 3,200 down to about 120, 140, we're making our own cut-up on that group each week internally to have ready for our coaches to watch. So I think a good note there is, for your players that we have access to everything, right? So yes, we watch your highlights. Yes, we can see you at your best, but we're also watching full games and how you play without the ball. Drops, do drops show up? How's your effort? That sort of thing. And then we could critique that as we work through the process.
Anything in recruiting that's just outside of athleticism and playmaking that dumps kids?
Yeah, so we talk about the three most important criteria across every position. If you could boil it down to three things, it's play speed, toughness, and instincts. So across the board, those are the three things that we're looking for first as we put on our lens and are evaluating guys.
Hey, Josh, can I put you on the spot for a second?
Mhm.
So, because we all have enormous staffs, and we have recruiting people and so many in that office, there, at least this is my impression, that there's occasions where tape is being watched and it never makes it to the position coach because the evaluation is not good enough to get that far. Is that fair?
That is fair. Yes.
And then what are also, things that disqualify off the field, things that y'all really pay attention to?
Social media is a big one, right? So we're monitoring every guy on our board, their social media every week, and we're giving a report to our head coach. So this is kind of a sample that was pulled from this week of what that looks like. So anything off the field we can find out about a kid and really build that profile of who he is helpful information. So that social media piece is an actionable thing that we're doing every week, and we're checking for questionable content. And so, that is a big priority for us because, that is visible to the public, and you'd be surprised that even though these kids know that I think we're looking and we're watching how often stuff comes up and can end up hurting them with us in the process.
And will you quickly show those measurement slides and things?
Yes. So this right here, this is something that we track and kind of how this is not necessarily our position ideals, but I think it is relevant information. So this is NFL combine averages dating back to 2000. So this is 20 plus years of data here. And I think it's important to point out because these are the guys that have fully developed, right? Like they are at the best they're going to be athletically, and this is the best group of players participating in the combine. And you look down the list, and I think we all get caught up in measurables, right? And we know that the good football players come in all shapes and sizes, and I certainly think there can be a threshold of what qualifies a player measurable wise for this level. But you look down the list, and a 4.5 flat is above average at every position, right? So I think it's good to note and good information just to have, to not get discouraged if you're a kid who's, and it's a good reminder for us too as we're watching guys and oh, this kid runs 4.4 or whatever, that okay, is it really 4.4, right? Or if it's a little bit slower, how does he play? Play speed is always going to be the most important thing when evaluating that. But I think this is just some good measurables and good data to share that hopefully gives you some context to talk about. And then I'll jump back really quick. So these are just some tips on creating highlights that we've put together. And it seems like common sense, but I think it's also good information for players to have or anyone helping them create highlights on what is a highlight, right? Like what are we looking for? What are things that show up? What are things that you can have on your highlight tape that you're making to send out that are relevant? And kind of putting that on paper and having something to go off of. And I'd be happy to share this with anybody after if you'd like a copy. So I'm going to go through all of them, but just looking at offensively here and then defensively. And then last thing that I kind of have to touch on is just the upcoming spring contact period. So starting April 15th, college coaches are going to be out, right, coming in your schools. And so just a quick overview of this period. Our coaches can have contact with juniors and seniors. Okay, so as a staff, we cannot visit a school more than one time. So we're limited to one school visit across this entire period. Now, we don't have a limit on the number of coaches that can come in on a calendar day, but we only get one visit, which is different from January where we got 2 visits. This is the first time we've had junior tap with juniors during this spring recruiting period, and we actually get 2 contacts with those guys. So one has to be at the school, and then the other can be off campus. So just a little bit of information and just context for you guys to have as coaches start coming into your schools here shortly.
And this is a period where the head coach cannot go, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. No head coaches are on the road during this period.
Any questions, anyone? Well, we really appreciate both your time and your expertise and just all you provide to our kids in this state. It means a
Well,
lot.
in closing for my part, thank you guys for what you do. I know you work awfully hard and long hours, and I think it's fair to say you're probably underpaid for what you do. Lots of cases in athletics, even at the intercollegiate level as well. There's some that get paid handsomely, but then there's a lot that do not. But appreciate what you do, and I know back in my day, I always enjoyed the dialogue with the high school coaches. Even if they didn't have a player, we had good rapport, they would talk about other people they played against, and you would get leads, and you would chase them. You know, it's just like we got 2 football players right now. At least been to practice and been part of the program that weren't highly recruited, but Eman is probably going to be a first rounder, and seemed like he didn't make the list at a lot of places, and then Lenore Sellers was not at the top of the list, very well could be the top quarterback in the SEC before the end of the year. So you still have things that happen, and with all the technology that we all have, that try to make recruiting an exact science, it's still imperfect.